We are here to talk about case study 2, AMD Struggle for Survival. Our group is Sharice, Brenna, Leslie, and Richard. And we're going to get started with a summary. In this case study, the organization AMD is one of the largest firms in the semiconductor business and produces a variety of processors for computers, workstations, and servers. Their primary competitors that are mentioned in the case study are Intel and NVIDIA. AMD struggled to react to its changing environment. They had poor management, poor leadership, and mismanagement of money. Their ability to change resulted in a loss of revenue, and they're up against many challenges and struggle to find the root causes to those challenges. So our group discussed several discussion questions. The first, how do you think the change process of AMD contributed to negative organizational performance? They mentioned several times that they had to restructure, and that included reducing the workforce, which was obviously an issue. They were too slow to respond to change when they should have responded, and they really didn't follow a specific change model, instead jumped from one idea to another very abruptly. Second question, how should AMD adjust and change its organizational structure and organizational culture? There were a lot of issues with this company. They had a very self-handicapping attitude. They were described as a second place company, where they thought it was impossible to compete against their competitors such as Intel. And that mentality was embedded into the organizational culture as the norm. Their centralized management and vertical communication caused problems for them, and they were just really focused in too many directions.
Yeah. And I think it was important too to recognize that within this particular organization, because their culture was so unhealthy, it made it very difficult for them to restructure because there was not a lot of buy-in from the company because they did a lot of things top down. And so therefore not being inclusive. And so as we kind of continued like reviewing the questions and talking about, what went wrong during AMD's change process, one of the big things that, we talked about and we focused on was leadership, simply that the leader had a lot of information, but did not use that information wisely, nor did he value the employee input that was given that may have prevented some of these challenges that occurred. So for example, Mr. Reza, he indicated that it might be a good idea rather than borrowing money to wait a year so that they would be able to use internal resources and they wouldn't have to be indebted to paying back a loan. He also talked about the poor accounting practices and the mismanagement of funds. So, the hope is that in looking at this particular situation, that AMD realizes that maybe if they nurture some of the leadership and appreciate the value of employee input, it will not be from top down, but it will also be bottom up.
And when Leslie had that, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Leslie had a great idea about, the new CEO building a core team. If you want to talk about that, Leslie.
Sure. Really kind of developing that core team. And we kind of thought back to the leadership challenge book that we read in the ethics and culture class, and where, you're going to model the way the leader is going to have that shared vision that really kind of hits with everybody, challenging that process, enabling others to act, giving them leverage and power to act, and then being able to encourage the heart, like really caring for the people. So we thought that would help create a better culture and around that core team.
Mm-hmm. And as we talked further, one of the discussions was what might an organization development consultant have offered to the leadership of AMD. And as we know, with any good organization, it starts with having a strategic plan because it gives us direction in terms of, what should be happening, when it should be happening. And it's a very good um, guide to help organizations stay on track and determine or actually see what their progress is, or if they're not having progress, what would be those types of things. Um, Also in the strategic plan, talking about a mission, a vision, in terms of giving guidance and directions, giving ideas on restructuring the managerial structure simply because again they were operating top down and not being inclusive, and also making sure that they change the culture. I remember when we took the class on culture, we talked about that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we know that how important culture is because it makes a determination on how well people will interact with each other. And again, definitely looking at um, getting some ideas on how to basically budget and how to spend the money that they were making.
Our next question is around recommendations that we would have made to make the process flow smoother. So the question is, what would we have done in order to make AMD's change process more successful? There are a couple things here. One is the organization at large, before, after doing the change process, should focus on maybe one thing that they do well, instead of having a hand here and acquiring another company and trying to do a million things. To be really successful, it's really important that they focus on one thing that they're really good at, much like what their competitors are doing. The second thing is, and this has been kind of alluded to over and over again, but really leveraging one change management process or theory. When you're able to really focus on that one theory, that allows us to see our progress, track progress, and move on without us kind of hoping or grasping change as it happens. A lot of times in a text, there was mentioning an idea came forward and people jumped on it. The idea of opening a factory in Germany, people just jumped at it and did not really sit with a process or a plan, which may have had detrimental effects on the organization. Our next phase of this conversation leads towards, we're going to talk about 3 innovative responses to change, ways in which the organization could really navigate this whole change process. The first recommendation we have is just having a plan in place, right? Having some kind of strategic plan, and that will really guide and hopefully undercut some of the challenges they're experiencing. So as an example, we consider McKinsey 7S model. When we think about the McKinsey 7S model, that model includes 7 words that start with S, and such as style, staff, skills, strategy, and so on. Identifying those 7 things and having some sense of key performance indicators under all those things so that we're tracking our progress in those areas. It's really important that we also focus on the structure of the organization. Several times in the text, there was mentioning of financial missteps, we'll call them. They could have done things differently, and that would have really helped save the organization some money and make it more compatible with its peers or with its competitors. And it's really important that they have some kind of clear structure or system around money allocation and not just spending money frivolously, which could shore up their R&D funds. The last couple of things we'll say in this area around having a plan in place. Hopefully that plan will lend itself towards creating shared values, shared style, changing the leadership structure of the organization. Instead of having a top-down approach, perhaps have an approach that it allows all voices from top to bottom, from bottom to top, and side to side to also be heard. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, Richard, to go along with that, they do need that strategic plan in place. They do need kind of the strategic plan for the whole organization. But then as our second thing, we also kind of said they need to adopt a change model. Like if they know that their organization is about to embark on a monumental change that's going to be something different for almost everyone in the organization, they need to consider, is Lewin the best model for us? Do we want to unfreeze, change, refreeze? Maybe it's Cotter's steps, but somebody at the top needs to say, you know, I see a change coming. We need to prepare the people. This is what we're going to do. And so we felt like that was completely lacking in this particular case. And then the third thing, once they do get some of these plans in place, they need to progress monitor. They need to look at these outcomes on a fairly regular basis to make sure they're not getting stuck in the rut. And we've talked about that in the THARP text, when, you know, you can either be stuck in a rut or you can be stuck in a groove. And we know one's good and one's bad. And we want to get in the groove, but sometimes due to bad timing, bad luck, bad ideas, the market, we might get stuck in that rut. So hopefully they can monitor frequently and hopefully get to that rut before it becomes a really big problem and they've gone down this road of disarray, discombobulation, and just things are all over the place.
And I think in just kind of wrapping up what we talked about, we just recognize that, you know, innovation comes from certainly building upon ideas. And, you know, with this particular company, it might be helpful for them to know that sometimes it may be a slow process because of hunches and different things, but certainly leaning on a lot of the things that we learned earlier on in some of the courses about leadership and relationships, that it would be important for AMD to follow those things in order for them to remain competitive and recognize that, you know, they have value even if they consider themselves second best. We appreciate it and we thank you for your time.